Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully, you were able to grab a cookie or some chips and a drink and ready for the next session. Just a couple of things I'll mention before introducing your speaker. One is that the next break will be your last opportunity today to buy yourself one of these amazing new Pet Friendly Services t-shirts or some of their other merchandise. So if you were planning to get one, don't wait till the end of the day because they're going to break that down after the next break. Then I also want to remind you once again to fill out your evaluation sheet so that we can get your feedback. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker in our next session. The next topic is kitten nutrition, feeding for healthy growth. And I'd like to introduce Dr. Emily Coleman, who is a veterinarian specializing in feline care with a focus on prenatal kittens and spay-neuter services. After years in private and shelter medicine, she launched a mobile feline practice to support rescue organizations. She fosters over 30 of the most vulnerable neonatal kittens from surrounding counties each year. When not busy with her foster kittens, she enjoys live music, reading, hiking, and kayaking. With that, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Emily Coleman.
Thank you for that. All right, can everyone hear me okay? Is that okay if instead of holding it up? No? Okay. Okay. All right, is that better? Okay, all right. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining me today. I think that this is the one that maybe should have been after lunch, but I'll be talking about kitten nutrition. But first, I just wanted to get a feel for who I have in the room so I know who I'm talking to. Do I have anyone that's here for CE credit? Okay. Veterinarians, LVTs, is that, okay, all right, perfect. This topic is something that I have a list of resources at the end, so definitely maybe take a screenshot of that afterward. There's a lot of good information, and as I'm speaking, I do have which article that you can get that information from. So by day, like I was introduced, I am a mobile veterinarian. I have a high volume spay-neuter clinic that is a 26-foot RV that I do cats only. And so I go around to I'm from Virginia, and so I drive around to local rescues, about 12 to 15 at any given time, from just south of DC to Richmond, and do about 20 to 40 cats a day. So we have it set up so we can do TNR, we can do kittens, and I do have full service for, you know, the cats that stay in rescues forever. So the geriatric ones that come in, we do full service services for them as well. I'm not a nonprofit, but I try to keep prices as reasonable as possible. We're in a pretty expensive area, and we do have quite a few high volume clinics in the area, but it's still not enough for our area because we're very heavily populated. So then when I am not doing that, I'm actually the executive director for the National Kitten Coalition, and being where I am in Indiana, has anyone heard of us before? Oh, good. Okay, this is more than we all thought we were going to have. So I think this is the first time that we've spoken at this conference, as far as I know. I've been with the organization about 5 years. I started out writing content for them, and then I joined their board for a few years. And then in September of last year, we decided it made more sense for me to be the executive director, and so I took on that role. And so I, of course, forgot my business cards. But if you want to write down, if you want to send any follow-up questions to info@kittencoalition.org, that goes directly to me. And our website is listed at the bottom of the slide as well. So we are a nonprofit that is based solely in education. We do not foster, we do not have a rescue organization, we don't have physical kittens as part of National Kitten Coalition, even though that sounds like we should. We all do foster on our own with our local humane societies, but we are a very small organization, so we only have 2 staff members plus myself, 5 board members, and we're spread out all over the U.S. We were founded in Virginia, and the founder, one of the founders, is still a part of our board and a very active participant in the organization. She's the president of the board. She's still giving talks and all. But we've been around for about 20 years. And a lot of times when we come farther west, no one has heard of us. So I'm glad to see that there were so many. I'll have to report that back to everybody. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is we do have a relatively new part of our website, which is called the Kitten Resource Library. If you go to the website that's listed, kittencoalition.org, you'll be able to find that Kitten Resource Library. And that is something that we're trying to have everybody add to their discharge forms if you're a veterinarian, or to your adoption paperwork, because that takes a lot of the training that you need to go through with those 15, 30-minute appointments you have with new kittens. Well, how could you ever possibly cover everything you need to cover in that amount of time? Send them to us, and we have all the information they need on what they need to do to set up for success for their kitten. And then we have lots of blog articles. You can follow us on social media. We do webinars every month, and they're 30 minutes, usually in the evening at some point, afternoon or evening. And we just did one on Wednesday on vaccines. And so it's focused to the general public as well as shelter medicine, and veterinarians come as well. So we have a mixed bag of participants. We are rolling out, hopefully May 1st, I think is our set date. I think we finally decided. We're going to be rolling out a certificate course, which is 3 hours of RACE-approved CE for veterinarians and LVTs, that is called Kitten Confident. And that's going to be 100% kittens. It goes through the basic husbandry, the exam room, and then we started in on the main things that we see with kittens, and then it'll be continually adding modules as we go. So hopefully, look for that. That should be May 1st. We're still in the final editing process right now. So, all right, but let's get started on kitten nutrition. So the main thing I like to stress is that this is really a guideline, because every kitten is different, and I have fostered enough over the years to know that no one likes to follow the same pattern necessarily, even ones in the same litter. All the pictures you'll see are kittens that I have fostered over the last decade, and you'll see different variations of bottles and things like that, and so I'll go through it as we talk further, but really every kitten needs to be evaluated as an individual. It's just something that we can't force that wean or anything like that, and we can't necessarily assume that every kitten in a litter is going to drink the same amount of milk, and so this is just a guideline, but it does give you a baseline. Okay, this is Chickadee. You'll see her grow up through this presentation. And then what we define a neonatal kitten, that period is different depending on who you ask. The National Kitten Coalition says the first 28 days. Sometimes you hear the first 14, sometimes you hear the first 21. We say the first month. When you have a kitten and it's with its queen, then you obviously are not as concerned about the nutrition of the kitten individually. You need to provide that nutrition to the queen herself. And so providing the necessary nutrition, such as the high-quality balanced diet, usually free choice, and ample amounts of fresh water, because you need to keep these queens well hydrated. Or you have an orphaned or rejected kitten, and then suddenly the human is in charge, and you have a caregiver that needs to provide milk replacer. And so some developmental milestones. This is Chickadee growing up here. At birth, or almost immediately after birth, the suckle reflex is present. And I should mention also, there is a printable download on our website that shows Chickadee all the way up to 8 weeks of age, and it has all the milestones. And so that might be better than this. This is a little cramped, I know. So with eyes, you can see the first week of life, they're closed, and that's to protect those eyes from drying out, because tear production is not completely normal, or the adult version of normal. So then at 8 to 10 days, they start opening. chickadee here is 1, 2, 3, and 4 weeks old. By 20 days, you have fully opened eyes, and usually they're those eyes that all you can see is the pupil, and you don't really see that blue eye just yet. The ears start off completely folded down. They can't really hear. They're off to the side of the head. From 0 to 7 days, they're completely folded. And then they go up from that 7 to 21 days, they start to unfold, and then at 21 days, they're unfolded and upright, and they actually can hear you pretty normally. And then different teeth come in very reliably, so you can age kittens from 2 to 4 weeks very reliably. At 2 weeks, they are having their little incisors erupt, and they come in all the way from 2 to 4 weeks. And then 3 to 4 weeks, you have the little canines come in. And then the one we're worried about when we're trying to wean kittens is have those premolars come in yet, and those are the ones that start to come in at 4 weeks of age. Other notable things are that kittens of this age are not able to regulate their body temperature, and they are actually unable to void voluntarily until 21 to 28 days. Again, most of the time you see 21 days listed. In my experience, the little girls start using the litter box at 21 days, and the little boys do not. They usually are that 4-week mark before they are ready to use the box. Okay, so one of the most important things when a kitten is first born is that it gets that first milk from its mother. That colostrum from the lactating queen provides all the essential nutrients and immunoglobulins for the immune system support. And so you can see here, this poor mama had 8 babies that all survived, and she wasn't able to keep up. And we did actually pull some off of her eventually to hand rear, which I have one of those living in my house as a holy terror now. So the one smack dab in the middle there is Kiwi. So we kept them on mom though at first because we needed them all to get this first milk. And then she wasn't able to keep up with them. She was actually pretty skinny herself, so we did pull some off. But if you don't have a mom and you have these kittens that are a day old and you know mom did not give them any colostrum, there is the option of giving plasma injections. And this has been common. Was common for a while and then considered something that we really don't need to do. It's not effective. Susan Little wrote a nice document that goes over all of that, how to do it. It is pretty complex, and so a lot of people don't choose to do it, but it is something that's an option. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. Okay, so the diet of a neonatal kitten. Obviously, the queen's milk is ideal, right? It has everything that they need. If that's not an option, then we want to get a high-quality commercial milk replacer. And we need one that meets caloric requirements and is also highly digestible. It needs to be able, the kittens need to be able to convert this milk replacer into the energy they need. And so on this little table here shows that energy requirements actually change pretty rapidly. It has, I know it's small, so it's 1 to 3 days, 4 to 6 days, and then 6 days through weaning. And so, again, it's a guideline, but we'll talk more about this in a few minutes. The stomach capacity and feeding charts that are provided and are all over the internet are wonderful, but again, they're guidelines only. So don't stress if you have a kitten that's not necessarily the age and weight and everything lines up perfect. That isn't something that you necessarily will always have, but it is a good guideline to start. And again, you just want to treat each kitten as an individual. So then you're left with the question of which milk replacer do we use? And we do not get any money from putting these pictures up here, but this is personal experience with me. I have been using foster care from Breeder's Edge now for a while. I do really like it. I used KMR previously, but I was personally seeing diarrhea with it at times. And so I switched to the foster care. And so the problem is that AFCO does not regulate milk replacer. So there's no guideline that you can go to and say, oh, well, these are the best ones, because they don't have, there's no guideline from AFCO that says this is what you need to compare your product to. So what we're left with is we have to break down what the queen's milk is, and then find something that matches it. And so there is an article that's in my citations that goes through that, and I'll make sure I point it out at the end. It goes through, it was in today's Veterinary Nurse, and it goes through how to look for a good product. And the most important thing is, though, is that milk from other mammals is not appropriate. It does not meet the caloric needs and the needs for a kitten. Water is an important consideration when you're talking about nutrition, and kittens' body water content is almost 80%. I think it's 78.8% that first week of life. And so they can become dehydrated very quickly because, one, they have a very large surface area to body mass, and their skin isn't as good as conserving water as adults. And also they're like mainly little water balloons, right? So 80% water, that's a lot of water. So they can become dehydrated rather rapidly. And so people worry about how do I make sure that they get enough water? Well, if you're using a kitten milk replacer that is one of the ones that is high quality and it looks like it matches mom's milk, then they have figured that out for you. And so there's a lot of dilute it first and that sort of thing. You want to make sure you follow the milk replacer's directions, and then the kitten will get enough water. And when they're this little, just as a side note, I tend to use syringes just because I feel like I can measure out how much they're eating. And this was one of a litter of 3, and I'm a vet, so I have lots of syringes on hand. Another consideration is prebiotics and probiotics for the neonatal kitten. And the nice thing is that most milk replacers have these added in. But you need to remember, they are damaged by heat. And so maybe that means you need to buy your kitten milk replacer. If you're buying it in bulk, don't buy it in the middle of the summer. Get it ahead of time so that it's shipped when it's not so hot. Make sure you're storing it somewhere that's, they say, cool and dry, and they mean it, because if you're putting it in a hot shed or something, on your property in the clinic, then that improper storage might damage it. And then another thing is you have to make sure that you don't mix it with too hot of water. And so I don't have a slide about how to mix up milk replacer, but typically what I do, and there's a picture of it later, I have a cup of water, warm water, and I put it in a warm water bath. And then that way it warms up. I don't like to microwave it because you can get hot pockets. You're definitely going to kill your probiotics if you're doing it, or your probiotics that way. And then also you worry about, you don't want to burn their little mouths if you have a hot spot. So, or you just make it in small batches and you don't have to reheat it because you just have the warm water mixing in with the milk replacer itself, just one batch at a time. So this little guy is Clark, and you'll see him later. So I just wanted to point that out. So obviously Clark is not the healthiest little kitten when I got him, right? He's about 8 days old in this picture. His eyes are just starting to open. He was very underweight and very dehydrated. And so feeding frequency has become a very hot topic in animal rescue. I'm sure that everyone has heard different opinions about this. And so one of the things that we really need to, or two things we need to take into consideration is, what is your age of your kitten and what is its stomach capacity? And like I said, there are stomach capacity charts based on age and weight. The nice thing with kittens is it's not like all the different breeds of puppies where kittens are basically the same size no matter what, versus, a Yorkie versus a Doberman. And so the frequency, and I'll just go through what I do. When I get a kitten that looks like this, I want to feed him every 2 hours the first day. It's a rough day, it's a rough night, especially like when sometimes I'll do these in between spay neuters, right? It's a lot. But you want to make sure you're making up for lost time, that you are giving them the nutrition that they need, and you're also not overloading them. You don't want to just dump a whole bunch of milk at them every feeding. And the main thing with kittens is you worry about hypoglycemia because they just cannot, they don't have the ability to store glycogen and use that as energy later. So their ability to prevent hypoglycemia and when they're fasting in between meals is very, very reduced based on kittens versus an adult. And so what I always worry about is, are they going to crash in the middle of the night if I don't feed them? So I usually feed them every 2 hours, and then I get a handle of what they're wanting. I've had kittens that are like, why are you waking me up? I don't want to eat yet. And they're fine. They do fine. And so that's why everybody's an individual. So you start every 2, and then you expand it out as you feel more comfortable. And that's around the clock. If you think about it, if mom was there, right, they'd go over and get a snack like constantly. Why do you think auto-suckling and suckling between litters, cross-suckling happens? Because they're programmed to nurse something that's fuzzy, right, all the time. And so, unfortunately, they're going to latch onto their brother's prepuce thinking it's a nipple, and then next thing you have a big problem. But they'll suckle on the fleece and all of that as well. So they're trying to just do what they're supposed to naturally do, and if you have an orphan kitten, you have to be aware of that. I had these 2, and I fed them every 2 hours for the first week, I think, and they didn't ever bother each other, so they were pretty content with that. So, and then you can go and extend your interval every 3-4 hours if they're gaining appropriately, if they're doing well, if they're taking enough per feeding. And we'll talk about complications here in a minute. And so stomach capacity for a kitten, something you can jot down, is 4 mils per 100 grams. That's pretty standard. That's a baseline to go off of. But you never want to do the maximum amount, right? I mean, you guys everybody just ate a big lunch, right? How do you feel right after you ate all of that food? You don't want to do this to these kittens every single time you feed them. And over that abdominal discomfort that comes from being like, okay, my entire stomach has just been filled with milk. Now I don't feel very good. Is a problem. So you want to go, your goal should be a little bit under that, and I don't have a specific number, but you don't want to ever go to the max, which you've calculated out. And it's important because if you feed too much, they're more likely that they're going to regurgitate. And then they're going to inhale milk, and then they're going to have pneumonia. They're going to have nasal discharge because it's going to be coming out their nose. The abdominal discomfort I mentioned. Diarrhea from overeating can happen. And then hypoglycemia, you think that doesn't make sense, but what happens is people think, well, I'm feeding the right volume, I'm doing it less frequently, and so they're okay because they're getting the right volume, so they're getting the right calories, but the kittens still can't regulate that energy requirement as well as adults. And so UC Davis they put out a paper, and or a poster rather, from their research, and they followed kittens, and they put them in an incubator versus not, they fed them all day versus only during like daytime, and they calculated out their growth, and they tracked them, I believe, for 4 weeks. And so incubators is something that we will be coming out with a very in-depth article here shortly. It'll be up on our website. I'm not going to go into details on this now. There's actually a recorded webinar on incubators on our website as well if you're interested in learning more. I'm a big component of big fan of incubators. I've incorporated in with my fosters. But not something I'm going to get into here. But basically, this study showed that if you keep them warm, and warm is like 90 degrees, that's what they want, 60% humidity and 90 degrees. Really not what you want to set your house to, match, because why would you ever want to do that? So an incubator is the perfect thing to do instead. And so if you do that and you fed them around the clock, they were able to convert that energy and that food you gave them to body weight growth. And they just did better overall if you kept them warm and fed them around the clock. And there's been a lot of talk and speculation recently about, can we let them sleep and let them sleep through the night if they want, and if they wake up, we'll feed them, but otherwise we won't. And I strongly advise you to not do that, just because that's against anything that pediatric and human is recommended. And it is something where, at least with me, I'm not going to hear my kitten wake up and mew, 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 and, overnight. And from experience, because I foster while I'm a vet, doing high volume spay neuter 20-40 kittens, because I'm crazy, I have this kitten sitting next to me crying while I'm doing a spay, and I'm like, okay, they're awake, and then boom, they're asleep again. I mean, it's like maybe 30 seconds. They give you this indication of like, hello, I'm starving, I'm dying over here, and then they're back asleep. And so, I mean, we were talking about time for spay neuter. It takes me 5 minutes to do a kitten spay, pediatric kitten spay, and I turn back around and it's like they never moved. So I don't think that anyone could trust themselves to hear that and wake up overnight when a kitten wakes up for that little very short amount of time. So my thing is, I just say, set a timer, set an alarm, wake yourself up. And it's a rough couple of days, and then you start expanding it out. And then usually, once I know that they are stable, then I will do 1 hour longer at night for my own peace of mind, right? Because I need to, or my own sanity, I need to sleep a little bit. So if I'm feeding every 3 hours during the day, I'll feed every 4 at night. It's just a good guideline to go through. Okay, so then bottle feeding obviously is the best way, using a bottle. And you'll see here, one year decided I was going to try glass bottles because I didn't like those little plastic ones. I never felt like I could get them clean enough. And so I purchased those like craft glass bottles that I could pop the dropper out of the top of them and put a miracle nipple on them, which I'm sure everyone knows what a miracle nipple is if you're doing neonatal kitten. I'm a big fan of those. And so glass bottles, and some people would say, well, you can't squeeze that, you can't get it started, but I know for a fact that they work. They do work because I had a kitten that had a sister, and one time I was talking to my husband, and she drank the entire 60ml bottle while I was talking without realizing that she had drank the whole thing. And it was supposed to be only 30 mils per kitten. So the suction doesn't get too, once they figure out their suckle, it's perfectly fine. So just something that if you're having a hard time and you feel like those plastic bottles, you just can't get them clean, or if you're like me, you try to reduce your plastic use, it's something you can think about. So a bottle feeding, it mimics more naturally, correct? So it's enabling the kitten to nurse until full, and then it prevents overeating, supposedly, but not with that little girl because she said, I will just eat it all, it's fine. But then you get a kitten like this, who for the look at her, she should have been eating on her own, right? I mean, she's like 3.5 weeks old, no problem. She should have been taking the bottle easily. No, absolutely not. She didn't want to take a bottle until she was a full 4.5 weeks old. And I don't know why. So usually when you have to tube feed a kitten, you have something like a cleft palate or an illness, or they're just not thriving. This kitten, I guess she's just, I don't know. I never figured out what it was other than she just did not have a good suckle for the first 2.5 weeks that I had her. So I just tube fed her. And this is the picture I was mentioning. It has my little cup set up with my the gastric tube, and then the little cup with the syringes full of milk. And so the supplies for tube feeding are pretty basic. The knowledge of how to do it is not. I'm a big component on being trained by an experienced individual, such as your veterinarian, instead of going to YouTube for practice. You do have to measure from the mouth to the stomach, so you have to know how to measure, and you have to make sure that you're going in the right hole. And so after 1 or 2 tries, then usually people are fine with it. And if you have a kitten like this who's talking to you while you're doing it, then you have no problem knowing for sure that you're in the right spot. What I usually do is if I have a kitten like this, I have as many people, my clients, that want to come, just go ahead and try once, because once you feel it once or twice, then you'll really understand what it is. I have a lot of veterinarians that are hesitant to this, to teach this, but you know how to intubate for surgery, so you understand the anatomy, and I know you can do this. Okay, another consideration is you need to make sure that the kitten is not cold when you feed, because when the kitten is cold, its gut is not moving. And the last thing you want to do is put a whole bunch of food in a kitten's stomach and have it curdle. and then have them vomited up later, which is never pleasant. So you want to make sure that the kitten is at the appropriate temperature for its age. And neonatal kittens are colder than kittens that are about 4 weeks of age. So they start off around 97 to 98 degrees Fahrenheit, and then they increase slowly, and then by 4 weeks they're at 100. So definitely take their temperatures. Do not feed them when they're cold. And then also you want the milk to mimic that of the queen, which is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And one of the most important things when you're feeding bottle babies is to weigh them. And so you need to weigh them at least once a day at the same time every day. Even if they're with a queen, you still want to weigh them. And then this is how I figured out how to keep them still. That's a tissue box. And so it doesn't have the plastic around the top. And so at certain points during COVID, I had so many different litters of kittens in my house, and I needed a way that I could just be like, this is your box, and this is your box, and then I kept it separate that way. And they stay in there pretty good until they're about weaning age, and then they don't want to. But it's a really easy way instead, because I find those trays and everything, it's too much, or even a cardboard box for that. So yeah, tissue box works perfect. And then there was a time where I had 4 kittens, and I just had a little notepad, one of those waterproof ones you can take when you go hiking. My husband had on hand, and so then I was just writing out everybody's weights every day in grams. Grams are an easier way to track, because how would I ever remember that with all 4 kittens? And then you can see where I wrote in when I gave them their dewormer and everything. So I guess that was 6 years ago, around now, that I was heavily into feeding these guys. And so one thing that's important is a lack of weight gain is just as important as a weight loss. So if you have a kitten that doesn't gain weight for a day, you might be like, okay, you're on my radar, what's wrong with you? And then the next day, okay, they gained, we're good. Sometimes it just has to do with when they have a bowel movement and their weights fluctuate. But you just want to see, if you're weighing them at the same time every day, you just want to see that steady increase of about 10 grams a day on average. And so if you're doing this, then you're going to catch problems early. And a lot of times if they're stalling out, they might maybe be coming down with something like coccidia or an upper respiratory or something like that. Okay, so the weaning kitten now, moving on from neonatal. So weaning is the gradual process of transitioning kittens from milk to solid food. It's a messy process. It's a frustrating process. This is when the most kittens die, I think, because they're not being managed appropriately. I have, very seasoned rescue workers that come to me. Last year, they brought me a kitten, and they said, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it won't eat. And it wanted a bottle, and it was 5 weeks old. And as soon as you gave it a bottle, it was like, yep, that's what I've been asking for the last, week. And after that, boom, started gaining weight, and everything was fine. And they were like, I can't believe we didn't think about that. We were told they were weaned. So gradual, that's the main thing here. We usually start at 4 to 5 weeks of age. I don't see male versus female difference in this, really, not as much as litter box use. But it starts when the chewing teeth are in, right? So the body knows when the body's ready to move on. So when these teeth come in that can chew this meat, then that's when they're ready to wean. Not always, but usually. And so you don't want to start trying to give a kitten solid food if they don't have those teeth in yet, because their body's not equipped to handle it. And so usually it's 4 to 5 weeks of age when it starts, like I said. And so development milestones for these guys, they're usually very alert and mobile. They're playful. They're getting to the point, if they're not out of the incubator yet, they're about to be, because they are, they've outgrown it at this point. They don't need that high heat, high humidity. And so, like I said before, at 3 to 4 weeks is when their canine teeth start to erupt, and then 4 to 6 is that premolars. And so they have the 2 premolars that come in. The big chewing one is usually starting around 4 weeks. You'll see the 3 little, pokes through the gum line. And so this is my setup when I'm decided that somebody needs to be weaned. And you can see in the background, that was my original incubator. I made it out of a tote, and my husband drilled holes in it, and then we had a heating pad in there, and that's how I started out, and it worked fine. The incubator obviously works better, but they did well. So this is what I call the meat milkshake, right? Like, ugh, it's disgusting. It's got a blender ball in there you can't see, so it all chops it all up, and I put it in a mason jar because, again, I try not to use plastic. And so then I prefer, Royal Canin's mother baby cat just because of how fine it is, and they seem to like it. And so if I notice that someone is like getting ready to maybe want to wean, I'll make them this meat milkshake real thin so that they can start to get a little bit of it in their system while they're drinking from the bottle. The mousse, you can actually make it thin enough if you put like 1 tablespoon into your mixture, and it just makes it thin enough that they're getting it, so their guts are getting used to it, again, because we don't want them to break with diarrhea. So their guts are getting used to it, but they're not actually getting that much of it yet. And so you mix with formula initially, and then you slowly decrease the amount of formula, and then you start to add water if they still like it a little mushy. And that's what I put after. What I usually do is I say, okay, here's your meat milkshake, but we're going to put it in a bowl. You rejected that. All right, here it is in a bottle. So I never withhold the milk from them with the bottle. I try to get them to eat when they're hungry. That's better. Don't feed them the bottle first and then try to get them to eat from the pan, because they're going to look at you like, I already did that. I'm good. And so then also what I've noticed over the years is that some kittens hate this. They don't like the mousse. They won't eat the mousse. I've had a high enough percentage, I feel like it's worth mentioning. You give them dry food, and they're like, this is wonderful. This is what I probably will eat the rest of my life, because I'll be 18 and have kidney disease and put my nose up at every canned food they offer me, right? So don't be alarmed if that happens. I've had it happen in enough kittens where you just they don't want it. I don't know what it is. And then later, when they get adopted, people are like, well, what do you feed them for canned food? And I was like, I don't, because they hate it. And then suddenly when they're 4 to 5 months old, they're like, I love it. It's so good. So whatever. But at this point, you just let them it's kitten driven, right? You just let them decide. So I offer them this stuff, and then if not, they nurse. A lot of times I find if you wait a little longer, the transition's easier. They're less messy and all of that. And of course, you want to clean them up after every time. Always have baby wipes ready just to wipe off their mouth and their face, because you never want that sticky mess going back into your incubator. That's why I just feed them on my table. I usually put a pee pad down and feed them, and it's a mess, and then you just clean it up and move on. But yeah, so it's always in steps. So this is Cilantro, who finally decided to take a bottle after she grew up. After she decided she was mature enough and didn't need to be tube fed anymore. I mean, I didn't even have to restrain this kitten to be tube fed. I just put it in her, and she just swallowed it down, and I don't understand. But once they get to this age and they're weaning, you do need to offer them water. Disaster time, right? Like, they're going to walk in it. I don't know how many kittens they put their whole face in it, and then they're sneezing and they're flinging it everywhere. And so I get I said a shallow bowl. I usually use the ones they have for like rodents at PetSmart. They're like this big, and they hold a little bit of water to get them used to it, but it's not something where they can spill a whole big thing of water, because that's so frustrating. All your fleece bedding and everything is just destroyed. So I usually start off with a little tiny one for like guinea pigs or rodents or ferrets or whatever. And you just want to offer a small amount just to get them. They're still getting their bottle, so they really are still getting enough water, but then you just want to go ahead and start so they can get used to it. Just don't put it right next to the dry food either. That's not good for cats in general, but last thing you want is to have your dry food wet, and then maybe they'll eat it then, but if it sits too long, it'll get moldy. And then, again, probiotics is a big thing with kittens this age, because everyone breaks with diarrhea, because this is the time where you think, why do I do this? Because when they're 1 to 3 weeks old, yeah, I'm tired, but everything's nice and clean. And then you have these kittens that are then, all the parasites start hitting, and the food change starts hitting, and then you have all of this diarrhea. So I really like using probiotics with when it's weaning time. I add it to the food. I add it to the milkshake. I do meat milkshake. I do whatever I need to do to get them to eat it. And a good thing to mention at this point is kittens of this age, a lot of times you'll have them on amoxicillin or Clavamox or even Doxy if they're old enough, because they have an upper respiratory or something. Any kitten that's on an antibiotic should be on a probiotic for the length of the duration of the antibiotic plus a little extra, because you don't want to wipe out that normal bacteria in their gut when you're giving them an antibiotic. And something that is not usually mentioned is please don't give them at exactly the same time, the antibiotic and the probiotic, because you're wasting your money. You really should give it 3 to 4 hours after. So time it so that the antibiotic isn't going in at exactly the same time. And if you're sprinkling on their dry food, then they're getting it throughout the day, and that's perfectly fine too. Okay, so again, kitten-driven weaning. You like this picture? I was very proud of this. This is just a kitten. He was waiting for his adopter to come, and it was a nice day, so I had the window down, not knowing that was how that was going to play out. But yes, kitten-driven weaning. So it's very important for their overall well-being. It's hard. I get it when you're in a shelter and when you're inundated, but I am a believer that if you let the kittens wean on their own, then you'll have less health problems because you'll have healthier kittens. So you'll put the work up front, but you will have healthier kittens, so maybe your vet bills will be lower, or they won't break with diarrhea. They won't start losing weight. I see lots of kittens that they'll start losing weight around this age, and people are like, I don't understand, but they're not providing them enough calories by supplementing with a bottle. Every kitten is very different. And so if you're weaning with a queen present, then let them stay with the queen. And usually kittens with the queen will actually start to wean earlier because the food's already there and they're watching mom and they're learning everything from mom. So they'll actually start to wean a little bit earlier. But this is the time where you really need to monitor weight closely. Okay, and so the wean kitten, this is Clark from that picture from before. This little guy didn't wean until 16 weeks old. And so if they were with a mom in a colony, moms usually will let them nurse up until about 16 weeks old, and then mom said, I'm done, because she's already getting ready to have her next set, right? So he decided that was fine. I've never had a kitten before where he'd be running around playing in my house, and I had to call him, and he would come running and sit for his bottle. I mean, he was hilarious because he was way too developmentally advanced to be still needing a bottle, but he needed it, so whatever. And so he did fine. He got adopted, and then everything was fine. He weaned finally, so I could get him adopted. But they all should be weaned by 12 to 16 weeks. Naturally, that's when that would happen. Obviously, in a shelter situation, that is not something that you can do for everybody because you would be inundated. But naturally, it would be that 12 to 16 week mark. And so if you have one that's lagging behind, have it spayed and neutered, that's fine. But if it's still taking a bottle, just hang on to it just a little bit longer before you send it out for adoption, because then you don't have an adopter calling you up saying that there's an issue. So developmental milestones for these guys, and this little guy is a Pan-Luke survivor, so I like to include him, Burrito. And so they are highly alert, highly mobile, playful, curious. 3 months is when they start losing those front incisors, and so that's our marker, at least for our clinic. If they've lost those incisors, if there's about 3 pounds, they're 3 months, they can get a rabies vaccine. In Virginia, the law is by 16 weeks. I'm not sure what it is in Indiana, but we try to get them as early as 12 as possible. So they're going for spay-neuter. We do 2 pounds as our minimum just because the drug combination I use works really well for that. And if they're 1.5 pounds, it's a nightmare. So I just stick with 2 pounds. If a boy is 1.8 or 1.9, obviously we'll go ahead and do them. And then they're available for adoption, right? So they're weaned and they're done and off they go. So the wean kitten, I'm not going to get into all of the specifics and bore you with the nutrition for the wean kitten. I mean, follow what is out there, right? The big companies that provide high quality kitten food, you need it free choice, and then you offer canned food 2 to 3 times a day. The thing that I want to mention is now is the time to get them used to the different textures of food, because the veterinarian 15 years down the road will thank you when the kitten that you raised eats the renal food that it needs to eat, right? So kitten food comes in like the mousse and the pate and the little sliced little pieces of meat. And so you definitely want to offer them different. Try to stay with the same protein. You know, if you're doing it, put probiotics in. But you never want to do anything abruptly, but just something that you can do to help for the future cat. Because I have had cats myself where, a long time ago I didn't offer them canned food, and then they got to be 15 years old and I offered them canned food and they were like, this isn't food. Like I have one cat that will only eat Purina OM, right? The overweight management, the driest, nastiest food. Like why would anybody, but that's the only thing they want to eat because that's what they're used to. So cats can be fickle about that. So with water, same thing, fresh water daily. It's going to be a nightmare. They're very active, very playful. They're going to knock it over. I usually have kittens in playpens. And once they graduate out of the playpen, I put the food and water in the playpen because then the water at least is in the waterproof playpen, so when it spills, it's not as bad to clean up. So you just want to use a bowl that's not easily tipped over, which in my mind, I have like potter, like people that do pottery in my area, and like they make like a beginner potter that made a bowl. It's like the heaviest bowl you can get. It's not going to knock over because they don't know how to thin it out or anything yet, right? So I have a couple of those from like the students in the area that make these big heavy bowls, and that's what I give my kittens because they're not going to spill that. And then again, we recommend, probiotics for any kitten that's going to a new home. So I will usually send a few days of probiotic for them to use like a half a packet a day or, something just for transition. If they're transitioning to a new diet, which is usually what happens when they're transitioning to a new home, and then if they're receiving antibiotics. And you want to continue to closely monitor them. You want to monitor their litter box output because if you're feeding them canned food 3 times a day and they're having 6 bowel movements a day and they're normal, maybe they're overeating. I mean, you just kind of have to balance it out just like you would with a puppy. Just that amount of wet food. And then, like I had said, offer a variety of textures. So here is the list of references. It's very tiny, but the one that is in today's Veterinary Nurse, the title is Neonate Milk Replacers. It was from 2024. And 2 LVTs wrote a really good write-up of, basically they did what AFCO does, but they went through every nutrient and they weigh it more in depth than I did. And then kind of rank, there's a chart where they show different milk replacers and what their labels say. So that one, again, that's the from today's Veterinary Nurse 2024 Neonate Milk Replacers. That's a good one to go to if you want more information on that. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so, and you can ask any questions about kittens at all. It doesn't have to be specific nutrition related. I feel like I'm the only kitten person here at this conference, so.
When do you switch from kitten food to adult food?
Oh, I didn't talk about that. I thought about that when I was making this. So I usually recommend that they start switching before a year because a lot of times, and you have to watch their body condition, and that's the most important thing. If you notice that they're starting to pack on a little bit extra in the belly region, then go ahead and switch them early, because preventing obesity in cats is so much easier than once they're already obese.
I have 2 quick questions, hopefully. The colostrum and in your the Shelter's Choice formula. They make both. Revival makes both of those. Do you recommend that colostrum?
The colostrum in the tube? Uh-huh. Yep, you can use that, definitely. Yep.
And then Shelter's Choice, if anybody wants to know, is cheaper than Shelter's Choice is the same combination as the Breeder's Edge that Revival makes.
It's just another one of their brands. Yes. Okay. And it's cheap.
Yeah, that's why we get it.
Hey, that works. Money is important. Did I see a? Oh.
Do you have a preferred probiotic product?
I personally like Fortiflora because of it being like seasoning and everyone loves it, and then also you can split it up. It's just easier for kittens in general, I think.
What tips and tricks do you have for getting kittens to latch if they're just being extra difficult?
Okay, extra tips for latching. My thing is try a different couple versions of nipples, and I wiggle it. So mama cat never sits completely still. I sit them on a fleece. I put, like if I have a heartbeat pillow with them, I'll prop them up on it so it's very, very like having mom right there. And then I'll put it in their mouth and wiggle it around. And if you start to pull back, a lot of times they will latch because they're I think their instinct kicks in and they follow it better. Okay.
So we use Reader's Edge at the shelter. I'm the foster coordinator at my shelter. Have you ever used the electrolytes, the Kitten electrolytes through Reader's Edge?
Yes, so Kitten Light. I didn't include that in this presentation, but yes, I am a big fan of Kitten Light for when you have kittens that have diarrhea, or you have kittens that you feel like that for whatever diagnosis they are losing electrolytes. It is very palatable. It's the kitten version of Pedialyte, but Pedialyte, once you open it, you have to throw it away after, was it 3 days or 2 days or something really. This has a shelf life of over a year, and it's a powder, and then you can mix it up. It's like bright yellow. You can mix it up and mix up a batch and refrigerate it for 24 hours. So me and my mason jars, I have mason jars of stuff. I have to tell my husband, like, don't drink that. That's not your electrolytes. That's for the kittens. But yeah, it's very palatable. And I usually offer fresh water as well. But I find that when they need it, they will drain the Kitten Light. So yes.
So like I'm sure a lot of groups in here are similar in that we will take in bottle babies, obviously, from Good Samaritans. And sometimes the Good Samaritans have been feeding cows milk for like 2 days. So we're wondering, is there, what should our steps be when we take those kittens in? Do we need to rush them to the veterinarian? If we do, what are we asking the vet for? Or are there things that we should be doing in our foster home to counteract what those effects are? I don't even know what the effects are, but.
A lot of times I'll see that they'll have diarrhea, they'll be malnourished, they'll be dehydrated because the water content isn't enough. And if you catch them early enough, you can always take them right to the vet, but the fact of the matter is a lot of vets in my area will be like, I don't know what to do with this. You can put it down. I mean, right? So usually what I'll have them do is I'll have them start with a high quality formula. And that's the one time I will have them dilute it down, like maybe 3-to-1 instead of 2-to-1, so that you're watering it down so you're getting a little more water in their system at first. And then after like 24 hours, go back to your normal 2-to-1. But usually they can recover pretty quickly as long as they aren't already having that like white or yellow poop that just says that, they're really in trouble.
As a veterinarian, I want to tell you thank you for this presentation, because veterinarians don't get a lot of education in neonate care. I've been interested in neonate care for almost probably 6 years or so, and the most information I get is from Kitten Lady. So thank you for that. My question for you is, when we get these neonate kittens that are have a diagnosis of corona, panleuk, how can we help them? Because from a veterinarian, sometimes I feel like I have very limited tools to help these kittens or entire litters that are affected with these diseases.
Okay, so first, Kitten Lady learned from us years ago, because she's originally from DC. So she actually took our workshops a long time ago, back when the founder was doing like live workshops. So yes, we love Hannah. She does a really good job. Our website has a lot of information, and we actually are, like I said, we are starting a certificate program that will give you more neonatal care. And with that, if you email me, I will send you the presentation I did at AVMA last year, which was for panleukopenia. I have semi on my own. I've used it a lot with other rescues. The Colorado outpatient parvo protocol, I extrapolated from that, and I have one for kittens. And so then that way you have something you can do, and especially if you're working with rescues and they have limited funding, then it's something that they can continue on. And the little guy, that he survived it with that protocol. So, yeah. Yeah.
Do you only give colostrum for the first 2 days, like if you get a newborn in? And then also, how do you know if you've put the tube in the wrong way? Will it react like a human does?
Right. So the colostrum, yes, the what you need in the colostrum will not be absorbed after the 48 hours. So the gut kind of closes up, then it doesn't absorb. And then as far as tubing goes, you usually will know very quickly because they will react like a human, like they're choking. But my favorite is when they're screaming, you're not in that tube. You know, when you have them, and you have to restrain them, right, when you're doing it. I usually use like a little, like a cloth or washcloth or something around them, like a baby burp cloth around them, so that they can't pull it back out. And usually they hate that, so they're screaming, and then if they're making noise, then you're good. But you just go slowly at first. And one thing I forgot to mention too is you always want to prime your line like you do with IV. You don't want to give them a whole bunch of air in the beginning, so you want to push some milk through first.
What's your preferred way to get the right humidity in your homemade incubator?
In the homemade incubator, that can be really challenging. So you usually need to have a humidifier and then one of those hygrometers that measures. But yeah, you need electricity for that part. And that's why I switched from using the homemade thing I had to that, because I found that they were doing better when it was actually regulated with the incubator that I have from Arcom. But yeah. Anyone else? Oh.
I just want to put in a plug for your veterinary conferences.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I should have mentioned that. Yeah, right? What am I doing? I'm not doing my job. So we also, every October, have a National Kitten Coalition has a veterinary conference. And so you get 6 to 7 hours of race-approved CE, and it usually the topics are not repeated from year to year. It's on demand then through the end of the year. We will be at Feline VMA. I'll be there in September, and then I'm not giving a talk, but we always have a booth there, and then we have that conference in the fall. So thank you, yes. It's online. So it's typically on a Sunday, and it's a perfect day to just sit with a cup of coffee and learn about cats. So perfect for the introverted vet that doesn't want to go to one of those big conferences.
What did you say what was the temperature for incubators?
Oh, the incubator. So I don't know if I put it on there, but usually 90 degrees is where you start, and then you decrease it by 1 to 2 degrees every week. Kitten Lady does have a chart that I like it's the same thing that I use. Anybody else? Well, great. I'm really glad of this turnout. I'm excited that so many of you are interested.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. So I'll remind you that there's another 10-minute break, and this will be your last opportunity today to buy merchandise from the Pet Friendly Services and these new T-shirts. Also, I think the vendors are still open, so that I encourage you guys, if you haven't gotten over there, to see them, and please complete your evaluation form.